We've been taught to weigh risk in a very specific way, to look at what we might lose if we act, and not to look nearly as carefully at what we're losing by not acting. Welcome to The Change Effect, the podcast that helps you turn life transitions into powerful new beginnings. One story, one shift, one breakthrough at a time. I'm your host, Noelle Van, an author, leadership coach, and change strategist who spent years in corporate America helping innovators and leaders break through barriers to create success on their own terms. I now work with women to step into change to create a life they love. Whether you're putting yourself at the center of your own story, redefining success, or making a power pivot in your life, career, or business, you're in the right place. Each week, we dive into conversations with trailblazers, changemakers, and everyday women experiencing the ripple effects that come from overcoming the fear and doing it anyway, providing actionable steps, practical strategies, and a whole lot of fun along the way. So if you're ready to step up and become unstoppable, buckle up and let's get started. We spend a lot of time talking about the risk of changing, the financial exposure, the uncertainty, the relationships that shift, the identity you have to rebuild. We treat change like the dangerous option and staying like the safe one. Now, I want to push back on that today because staying in the same place in life has a cost too. It's just a different kind of cost. Slower, quieter, easier to rationalize. The kind that doesn't show up as a single decision point, but as a slow accumulation of small erosions. And by the time most women name it, it's been happening for years. Today, we're talking about what staying actually costs. This is not to push anyone toward a decision they're not ready for, but to make sure you're calculating the full picture. Because the risk of staying in the same place is just as real as the risk of going. It just doesn't make itself known. So let's talk about the myth of the safe option. Here's where the confusion comes in. We've been taught to weigh risk in a very specific way, to look at what we might lose if we act, and not to look nearly as carefully at what we're losing by not acting. Staying in a role, a career, a relationship that no longer fits feels like the conservative choice. You know exactly what you have. You know the rhythm, the uncertainty is low, and in a culture that treats uncertainty as the enemy, that feels pretty safe. But what that accounting leaves out is everything that's happening on the other side of the ledger. The things you're not doing, the version of yourself you're not becoming, and the energy you're spending to maintain a life that stopped being yours a long time ago. That's not safety. That's a different kind of risk, one that's just harder to quantify. So here's what the cost of staying actually looks like. It costs you your energy, not all at once, but gradually. When you're spending significant time and effort on work or a relationship that doesn't engage you at the level you're capable of, or that requires you to operate as a fraction of yourself, there's a drain that's hard to name but impossible to ignore. You get home and there's nothing left for things that matter to you, or you leave an interaction feeling completely empty. It costs you your self-trust. Every time you know something isn't right and you talk yourself out of acting on it, you're training yourself to override your own judgment. And that compounds. Women who have been overriding their own signals for years often arrive at a transition point genuinely unsure whether they can trust what they know. And that erosion of self-trust is one of the most significant costs of staying too long. It can cost you time you can't get back. This one's hard to say plainly, but it needs to be said. You don't get the years back. The version of yourself you could have been building, the work you could have been doing, the life you could have been living, those are real costs, not abstract ones. And lastly, it costs you your range. The longer you stay in a context that's too small for you, the more your sense of what's possible narrows. You start to forget what you're capable of. Your ambition calibrates down to match your circumstances. That calibration happens slowly, and it's one of the hardest costs to see clearly from the inside. So how do you know that you're paying this tax? A few honest questions worth sitting with. Number one, are you coasting? Not taking your foot off the gas occasionally, but genuinely operating below your capacity because the context doesn't require or reward more. If the answer is yes, ask yourself how long that's been true. Number two, are you rationalizing or are you choosing? There's a difference between deliberate decision to stay, one you've made with clear eyes, and a series of reasons you've assembled to avoid making a decision at all. If you're collecting reasons to stay, that's worth looking at. Number three, what are you tolerating that you used to find intolerable? This is one of the clearest signals. When your standards start dropping to match your circumstances, When things that would have been non-negotiable a few years ago have quietly become normal, that's the cost of staying, making itself visible. And number 4, what are you not doing? The things you keep saying you'll get to, the version of yourself you keep deferring, the work you know you're capable of that keeps getting pushed till later. Later is also a choice. Now, I want to be clear about what this is and isn't. This is not an argument that you should leave your job, your career, your relationship. Some of you are exactly where you should be. Some of you are building something that requires exactly the patience and presence you're giving it. What this is an argument for honest accounting, for looking at both sides of the ledger when you're assessing where you are. Because too many women calculate the cost of changing and never calculate the cost of staying. And that incomplete math keeps them in places that are costing them more than they realize. So always remember, staying can be the right answer, but staying by default, staying because the alternative feels too uncertain, staying because you haven't made a real decision, that's not safety. That's just a slower kind of risk. So whatever you choose, be sure you choose it with your eyes wide open. For those of you who want to go deeper on this, I have included an exercise in the show notes called the Real Cost Audit. That's it for now. Until next time. Thank you for listening to The Change Effect. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review if you enjoyed this episode, so more women like you can find us and take their next step toward creating a life they love.